My name is Elias Thorne. For the past 15 years, I've worked as a restoration architect here in Port Blossom, a city that clings to the Oregon coast like moss to an old stone. It's a place of gentle, persistent rain, of towering Douglas firs that scent the air with pine, and of a quiet resilience that I've always tried to emulate. My work is my passion. I take old, neglected buildings, forgotten craftsman homes with settling foundations, once grand waterfront warehouses with salt-scarred brick, and I help them find their strength again. I study their bones, their history, their integrity, and I draw up the plans to make them whole. It's a slow, methodical process. It requires patience, an eye for detail, and a deep respect for the original structure. For a long time, I believed the same principles applied to a marriage. I was wrong. The morning it ended began like any other. A soft, gray light filtered through the large windows of the kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I was grinding coffee beans, the rich, earthy smell of familiar comfort. Our house, a century-old bungalow I'd spent 3 years bringing back from the brink of decay, was my sanctuary. Every polished floorboard, every piece of restored trim, every pane of wavy, antique glass held a piece of my heart. Clara used to say the house was my first love. In the last few years, her tone had shifted from affectionate teasing to something with a sharper edge, a quiet accusation I never knew how to answer. She was still upstairs, presumably asleep. Our mornings had become separate affairs over the last year. I would rise with the sun to enjoy the stillness, and she would emerge hours later, wrapped in a silence that felt as heavy as the coastal fog. I had grown accustomed to the emotional weather of our home, learning to navigate the low-pressure systems and sudden cold fronts with a placating word or a retreat to my workshop. I told myself this was the work of a long marriage, the sanding down of rough edges, the patient reinforcement of a shared life. My phone, resting on the soapstone counter, buzzed softly. I glanced at it, expecting a notification from the structural engineer on the Oak Haven Library project. Instead, I saw Clara's name. A text, sent from the room directly above my head. I want a divorce. All future communication should be directed to my attorney. His information will follow. I read the words once, then twice. They were clean, sterile, and utterly devoid of the messy, complicated history we shared. There was no prelude, no tearful conversation in the dim light of the evening, no crescendo of anger. It was just an execution. A wave of something cold and hollow washed over me, not quite shock, but a profound, gut-wrenching finality. It was the feeling of a foundation giving way, not with a crash, but with a silent, sickening crumble. I set the phone down. The coffee grinder whirred to a stop. The house was utterly silent, but in my head, a decade of quiet compromises, of tiptoeing around her moods, of shrinking myself to make space for her ever-expanding unhappiness, roared to life. I had spent years trying to brace and support the structure of our marriage, patching cracks, ignoring the stress fractures, pretending the growing instability was just the house settling. And with a single text message, she had condemned the building. I took a deep breath, the scent of coffee and old wood filling my lungs. Then, I poured hot water over the grounds, the ritual a small, steadying anchor in a suddenly turbulent sea. By the time I had finished my first sip, a new kind of clarity was settling in. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a quiet, resolute acceptance. The demolition order had been given. My job now was to manage the process with care and precision, to ensure the surrounding structures, my life, my sanity, my future remained intact. At 8:47 a.m., I picked up my phone and typed a simple reply. Understood. Then I opened my laptop. My name was on every account. My income the sole source of funds since she'd left her job at the art gallery 3 years ago to find her creative path. I wasn't a man of vast wealth, but I was meticulous. I had designed our financial life with the same care I would a blueprint. For years, I had given her unfettered access, trusting her to be a partner. Now, she had defined the new terms. All communication through lawyers. That meant our personal, entangled life was over. It was now a legal matter. I would honor her request. I spent the next hour working with the quiet focus of a surgeon. I opened a new checking account in my name only and transferred exactly half of our joint savings into it. The remaining half I left in an account that would require dual authorization for any withdrawal, effectively freezing it. I called the credit card companies, explained the situation, and had her supplementary cards canceled. I left the main joint card open but lowered the limit to a few $100s, enough for an emergency, but not for a shopping spree. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the car insurance, all the essential bills that kept our shared roof over her head and the car she drove in the driveway. I wasn't cutting her off from survival. I was cutting her off from my unconditional financial support, just as she had cut me off from our marriage. When I was done, I sent one final, carefully worded text, CC&G my email for a paper trail. Clara, per your request to communicate via legal channels, I have secured our shared finances pending formal division. All essential household bills are paid. Your access to discretionary spending on joint accounts has been restricted. Please have your attorney contact me when you are ready. I made myself breakfast then and ate it sitting at the beautiful oak table I had refinished by hand. The silence in the house was different now. It was no longer her weapon. It was just quiet. And in that quiet, for the first time in a very long time, I felt the faint, unfamiliar stirring of peace. The first tremor from her side came the next afternoon. It wasn't from a lawyer, but from her older sister, Isabel. I was at my drafting table, sketching a new support beam for the library project, when my phone rang. Elias? What in God's name did you do? Isabel's voice was sharp, a blade of fury. Clara is here, completely hysterical. You've cut her off from everything. She can't even buy groceries. I took a slow breath, picturing the schematics in front of me, the clean lines, the logical distribution of weight. I needed that same structure in my response. Hello, Isabel. I'm sorry to hear she's upset. I was only responding to her request. She asked for a divorce and for all communication to go through her lawyer. I respected her wishes. Respecting her wishes? You're financially strangling her. That's abuse, Elias. Her needs are met, I said, my voice calm and even. The house is paid for. The lights are on. There's gas in her car. I even scheduled a grocery delivery for this morning before I knew any of this was happening. It was delivered at 10:15 a.m. There are photos in my email. I had, in fact, done just that. It was part of our weekly routine, an order I placed every Sunday night. In the chaos of Monday morning, I hadn't canceled it. It felt like a small, final act of a husband, a role I was now shedding. There was a sputtering on the other end of the line. That's not the point. You've taken away her autonomy. She's the one who declared our partnership over and requested a formal, legal process, Isabel. I'm just operating within the new framework she created. I paused. I can't talk to you about this anymore. Please have her lawyer get in touch. I ended the call, my hand steady. The old Elias would have been flustered, defensive. He would have apologized, tried to explain, maybe even reversed the financial freezes just to stop the yelling, to make the discomfort go away. But that Elias was the man who had spent years patching a crumbling marriage. The architect in me knew that sometimes you have to let the condemned structure go before you can build something new. Later that evening, the official salvo arrived. An email from a Mr. Sterling of Sterling & Finch, a high-end law firm known for its aggressive tactics. The subject line was stark, urgent, spousal financial abuse and coercive control. The email was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, threatening emergency court orders and accusing me of engaging in a calculated and cruel campaign to punish his client. I read it through, then methodically began to compose a reply. I didn't write a defense. I provided data. I attached the bank statements showing the 50-50 split of liquid assets. I attached the paid utility bills. I attached the credit card statement with the lowered, but still functional, limit. I attached the confirmation email for the grocery delivery, complete with the photograph of 3 paper bags sitting on our front porch. And at the very top of the email, I attached a screenshot of Clara's text message. I forwarded the entire chain to a lawyer my firm had on retainer, a quiet, methodical man named Robert Davies, and asked for his counsel. His response came within an hour. Mr. Thorne, your actions have been prudent and impeccable. You have established a clear, factual record. Do not engage with her, her family, or her friends. Let Mr. Sterling communicate with me directly. Stay the course. That night, I slept for 8 uninterrupted hours, a deep, dreamless sleep that had eluded me for months. I woke to the gentle sound of rain against the window pane, feeling a sense of quiet clarity I hadn't realized I'd lost. The week unfolded in a series of calculated assaults on my character, Each one met with the same calm, factual defense. A mutual friend, Maya, sent a long, pleading message on social media. Elias, I know you're hurt, but this isn't like you. Clara is falling apart. Can't you just talk to her? Punishing her like this is so cruel. I thought for a long time before replying. The accusation of cruelty stung, because it was the last thing I intended. My actions weren't about punishment. They were about self-preservation. They were about respecting the boundary she had so brutally erected. My reply was a single sentence. She asked that we only speak through our lawyers, Maya. I am honoring her boundary. The 3 dots on the screen pulsed for a moment, then vanished. There was no reply. By Thursday, the tone from Mr. Sterling's office had changed. He called Mr. Davies, insisting on an immediate temporary support order. His client, he claimed, was a prisoner in her own home, with no access to funds for basic necessities like medication or toiletries. Mr. Davies called me to verify. Elias, he's claiming she can't even afford to go to the pharmacy. I walked over to my desk and pulled up a file. Robert, I have the receipt for the prescription delivery from Tuesday. It was paid for automatically from the joint account before I lowered the limit. I also have the Amazon order history. A package with her preferred shampoo, soap, and moisturizer was delivered yesterday afternoon. She has everything she needs to live. What she doesn't have is a blank check. Mr. Davies was silent for a moment. I could almost hear him smiling through the phone. Understood. I will convey this information. The turning point came on Friday morning. An email from Mr. Davies, forwarding a voicemail from Mr. Sterling. The lawyer's voice was entirely different. The aggressive, blustering tone was gone, replaced by an urgent, almost conciliatory one. Robert, it's Richard Sterling. Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. I'd like to de-escalate this. Perhaps my client was a bit hasty in her approach. Can you please have your client contact me directly? Or perhaps we can arrange a 4-way call. I think a cooperative negotiation would be far more productive at this stage. We need to revisit the temporary support arrangement immediately. I listened to it twice. The man who had accused me of financial abuse 48 hours earlier was now asking me, the abuser, to engage directly. The strategy had backfired. Clara had expected a fight. She had expected me to yell, to plead, to beg, to rage. She had anticipated an emotional drama where she could cast herself as the victim, fleeing a volatile husband. An emotional response would have been familiar territory, a landscape she was an expert at navigating and manipulating. Instead, I had given her quiet, logical compliance. I had taken her at her word. She had declared the relationship a legal matter, so I had treated it as such. She had built a wall. I had simply stopped trying to climb it and begun to build my own. The problem, I realized with a profound and sorrowful clarity, was that she had no plan for what came next. She had the exit strategy, but no blueprint for the life that followed. She wanted the power of the ending, not the responsibility of the new beginning. 2 weeks later, we were in a small, sterile hearing room for a preliminary motion on temporary spousal support. Clara sat beside Mr. Sterling, looking pale and smaller than I remembered. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I sat beside Mr. Davies, a single, slim folder on the table in front of me. Mr. Sterling argued passionately for a generous, some $8,000 a month. He painted a picture of a devoted wife who had sacrificed her career for my own, a woman accustomed to a certain standard of living who was now being starved into submission. He spoke of her emotional fragility and my unconscionable hardball tactics. When he was finished, the judge, a woman with tired eyes and an air of no-nonsense competence, looked at Mr. Davies. Your response? Mr. Davies stood. He didn't argue or make impassioned speeches. He simply handed the judge and Mr. Sterling a copy of the spreadsheet from my folder. Your Honor, this document outlines the couple's finances. As you can see, Mr. Thorne has continued to pay for the mortgage, all utilities, insurance, and car payments. He has insured Mrs. Thorne has shelter, food, and transportation. This second document is a detailed breakdown of Mrs. Thorne's average monthly discretionary spending for the past year, which was primarily on non-essential items. And this third document is the initial communication from Mrs. Thorne on the morning of September 12th. He placed a printed screenshot of the text message on the overhead projector. The words appeared, large and stark, on the wall behind him. I want a divorce. All future communication should be directed to my attorney. The judge read the text, then looked over her glasses at Clara. Mrs. Thorne, was there any conversation with your husband about your intention to divorce prior to you sending this message? Clara flinched. We had our problems, she stammered, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. That's not what I asked, the judge said, her voice patient but firm. Did you inform your husband, in a direct conversation, that you were leaving the marriage and that you would be initiating this process? Mr. Sterling started to object, but the judge held up a hand. I'll rephrase. Mr. Sterling, did your client and her husband engage in any mediation or discussion about separation before she severed all personal communication? Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. Your Honor, there were long-standing issues of emotional incompatibility. The judge leaned forward, her gaze fixed on him. So, to be clear, your client unilaterally terminated the marital relationship and all personal communication via text message, and then expected her husband to continue funding her lifestyle as if nothing had changed? She instructed him to operate on a strictly legal basis, and when he complied by securing their joint assets through legal and appropriate means, you accuse him of abuse. The room was silent. Mr. Sterling had no answer. The judge sighed, picking up her pen. Motion for $8,000 a month is denied. Temporary support is set at $2,000 a month, which is more than sufficient to cover personal necessities, given that Mr. Thorne is covering all major household expenses. We will revisit this during the final settlement. I suggest you two work on a cooperative agreement, because I am not inclined to reward theatrical tactics. As we stood to leave, Mr. Davies leaned over to me and whispered, "That was surgical." I felt no triumph, no desire to smile. I just felt a deep, hollow sadness. This wasn't a victory. It was an autopsy, a clinical examination of a thing that had once been warm and alive. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. The process became surprisingly quiet and efficient after that hearing. We settled on a 60-40 split of the assets in my favor, acknowledging my premarital assets and the inheritance I'd invested in the house. I kept the house. The thought of leaving it was unbearable. It was more than just a building. It was a part of me, a testament to my ability to create and restore. Clara moved in with her sister. I signed the title of her car over to her, and she took over the payments. The last point of contention was Willow, our golden retriever. My lawyer was prepared to fight for her, but I told him to let it go. She needs the company, I said, and it was true. In the end, I wanted her to have someone to come home to. Some small, unconditional warmth in the new life she had chosen. People ask me now if I feel bitter, if I regret the swift, clinical way I responded. The truth is, I don't. The bitterness had been a slow poison in my veins for years, a side effect of trying to hold together something that was determined to fall apart. The text message wasn't the cause of the end, it was just the official time of death. My actions in the hours and days that followed weren't born of coldness, but of a long overdue respect for myself. For years, I had allowed my own boundaries to be eroded, my own needs to be silenced. I had mistaken my enabling for patience, my conflict avoidance for love. Clara wanted to control the narrative of our ending, to cast me as the villain and herself as the blameless victim. She expected me to play my assigned role. When I refused, when I simply respected the rules she herself had laid down, her entire strategy collapsed. I'm still in the house. It's quieter now, but it's a healthy quiet. The silence is a space for my own thoughts, for the music I love, for the contented sighs of a sleeping dog I adopted from the local shelter, a scruffy terrier mix I named Gus. I spend my evenings in my workshop, sanding down reclaimed wood, the scent of sawdust a kind of incense. I am restoring an old set of chairs, not because I need them, but for the love of the process, for the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it strong and beautiful again. Sometimes, on a rainy afternoon, I'll look out the window at the garden we planted together, and a wave of memory will wash over Meth, ghost of her laugh, the way she looked in the summer sun with dirt on her hands. I don't push the memories away. I acknowledge them, like old blueprints of a building that no longer stands. They are part of my history, part of the foundation of the man I am today. I learned that you cannot force a structure to stand when its core integrity is gone. You can patch and prop it up for a while, but eventually, you have to have the courage to let it go. Clara thought leaving was a demonstration of power. But I've learned that true power isn't in the leaving. It's in the quiet, steady work of rebuilding. It's in learning to draw your own lines, to respect your own design, and to build a life on a foundation you know you can trust.